Hello, I'm Mario Positano, and this is part one of a three-part video series on how to animate with Adobe Animate. Now, if you've never used the software before, or have never animated before, this is a great video, a great place to start. We're going to create a scene with three parts. We're going to have a background, a character, and something moving or rotating. So the background is kind of like this. Character could be something like me, right? But you want to keep it simple. Don't do a detailed character. And something moving. So I have clouds moving. I have this little spinny thing happening here. I don't know what it is. And that's what you're going to want. The trick is to keep it simple. You're going to try it. Make some mistakes, learn from the mistakes, try again, and it'll get better. Hope this helps you. Alright, when you're starting a project like this, you're going to want to plan first. You're going to want some tips to refer to. Okay? And at first those tips may not make a lot of sense, but I'll use them, I'll mention them when I start to use them. And then I'll recap them at the end so you can always relate back to those. If you don't follow those tips, your work could be a lot harder. So you might want to pay attention to those ones. And the last part, we'll actually be jumping right into the software. We'll talk a little bit about the interface, talk about layers, talk about the drawing tools, how to import images. And like I said, we're going to review those tips again. Okay? In the next two videos, we're going to talk about moving images. And we're going to talk about frame-by-frame animation. But for this video, it's more just an introduction to the interface and how to approach this project. Now, with regards to tips, these are the things that will, if you miss these, your work will be a little bit more tough. Okay, so you're going to want to follow these. At first, it may not make a lot of sense. But as I start working, you're going to see me use these. First is you're going to want to create your project and save it. Even before you start drawing, you want to create it and save it. That way you know where it is, you can open it back up and play with it a bit more. Okay. The second tip is save often. I tell this to everyone in every software. If you're working for 2 hours and you haven't saved and you lose your work, you got to do that whole 2 hours over again. Makes sense, right? Yeah, I know. So save often. Now here's the tricky one that won't, like I said, won't make a lot of sense, but it is an important tip. So you're going to want to jot this down on a sticky and jam it in front of you. Before drawing, you're going to set your drawing tool to object mode. In animation, everything we deal with are objects. And it kind of makes sense because everything really is an object. But if by having separate objects, it lets us control each part individually. So when you're drawing, you're going to want to tell your drawing tool to create an object so we can control it separately. Okay, so before drawing, set your tool to object mode. If you want to fill anything in, like color it in completely, you're going to want to draw all the way around and complete the object. Don't just have open loops. You want to completely close all your drawings. So if it's a circle, don't leave a little gap. Draw the circle all the way around. Okay? You'll probably want to make that circle with one sweep. Don't make it sketchy. Okay, it's another little tip there for you. Now there are some hotkeys that I'm going to use a lot. Here's the first three. When we're looking at our image, we like to zoom in and out of our image so we can see it better. So if you're using a PC, Control plus and Control minus will be your zoom in and zoom out. If you want to move the image around, so you're drawing here and then you're going to want to draw up there, pull the whole image over and draw over there. So if you want to move that screen around, you just hold the space bar. By the way, the zoom in and out, if you're on Apple, use Command plus or Command minus. Okay, so now you could start up Adobe Animate, and it's going to ask you some questions that you might not be sure what it's asking. So I'm going to walk you through that just in case. Okay, so it's going to fire up and it's going to say, create a new scene or open a scene. Well, we haven't created a scene yet, so let's create a new scene. Okay, by the way, never show a teacher where the arrow tool is. All right, so we're going to create a new scene. And then it's going to ask you what resolution for this scene. And that's a big topic, so I'll just give you the answer. We're going to use full HD. And that's basically what most TVs do. Now there's 4K TVs, but we don't need to generate something of that resolution. We're going to keep it simple. We're going to use full HD. Then you're actually going to save the project. Now this is important so you could find it later, or if it crashes you can load it up again. Okay, so at the very top you're going to click File, Save As, browse to your desktop, create a folder, and that's what this is showing here. Okay, so you're going to go to your desktop, create a new folder, go inside that folder, name your project. So this is Mario's amazing film. Of course it is. And then you're going to hit save. Okay. Let me just move that over for you. Hit save. And there you go. Okay, so here I am in the software. Well, actually, here I am in the software. We're going to click Create New. Okay, we got to wait a bit. And here's where it's asking you what's the resolution. So we're going to pick full HD. And that shows the resolution there, 1920 by 1080, in case it matters. Usually we use 24 frames per second. That's standard. Create. And again, we wait. And it loads up the package. We're ready to animate. But we want to save it first. So we know where to find it. And we know how to load it up when we want to play with it later. So we're going to go up to the very top. File. Save As. And you're going to want to browse to your desktop. Create a new folder. Name it My Amazing Film. Okay? And go inside that folder. And don't leave it untitled. You're going to want to name this as well. So I'm going to call this Mario's Amazing Film. Why not? It's not going to be amazing. Okay, now I have to be honest. Whenever I learn new software, I open it up and I look around and I'm like, there's buttons everywhere. What do I do? Right? So what I generally do is I break it down into sections. Makes it a little easier to learn. Okay, so I can see the tools over there. So we have our tools all here. Okay, and we're pretty much going to stick with our painting tool right there. Okay, so we have our tools. That's our tool section. Okay, we are going to use some of these other tools bit by bit, but at least we know where our tools are. Great, makes sense. We have our layers down here, and here's where we're going to have those 3 layers that we talked about. Our background, frame by frame animation, and something that moves or rotates. Okay, so we have our tools, we have our layers, and over here we have our timeline. This is where we get to play back and see our animation. And then there's all that junk over there. Not quite sure yet. We will use it. But it's a lot going on over there. Okay? So let's look at those tools first. We have our selection tool. That selection will let us select things, paint them, or select them and move them. The transform is what we're going to use for animation. Okay, so we'll use that in a different video. The paintbrush is what we're going to use to draw. And the eraser, well, you know what that is. The shape tool is pretty handy because it has a square, a circle, has the line tool underneath. So sometimes we just want a circle. And instead of trying to, I'm totally not good at that. I use a circle tool. And we're going to want to know what our color is when we're painting using the paintbrush. So at the very bottom there, you could see where we select our paint colors. You actually click on that blue square there. I have it currently set to blue, and you could select a different color. Okay, you'll notice that there's another square in behind it. I have it transparent. It's kind of white with a red line through it, which means transparent to us. And we want to keep that transparent. So that's our tool section. Let's move on to the next section. Let's talk about layers. So the layers are where we're going to have our background, our frame-by-frame animation, and our moving object. Now, if you'll notice in my example there, I have the background at the very, very bottom. Okay, and what I did to add those layers is I clicked this little plus button. Okay, there's a little plus button there that allows me to add layers. And then I could double click those layers and rename them. So I have background, motion layers, and motion is something that we're going to slide across the screen, and frame by frame animation. And then I just have an extra layer there called layer 1. I could rename it to something else. For example, in this scene that I'm using right now, I have what we call an overlay. And this is always on a separate layer, a fourth layer, right? My podium, I'm standing behind my podium. So my podium is what's called an overlay. So if you wanted something in front of the character, you would actually create another layer at the very, very top called overlay. You'll also notice that I've actually drawn, well, kind of drawn a background there. Let's call it a background. And you can see on that background layer, that's where that drawing exists. Okay, so you got to make sure you click on that layer when you start drawing. Okay, now remember, we do have to set our tools to object mode before drawing. So don't start, you can create the layers, but don't start drawing yet. I'm going to walk you through that in just a second. Okay, so let's create some of the layers. Select our drawing tool and set it to object mode. So there's my first layer. I'm going to rename it. I double clicked it, renamed it to background. Then I'm going to add another layer, and you can call this frame by frame animation. And I'm going to add another layer, and this will be my motion, something that slides across the screen. And like I said earlier, if you want to do an overlay, create another layer, and this could be our overlay. That's whatever's in front, like my podium. Now, if you're ready to draw your background, you're going to select the paintbrush, select a color. Remember to keep the background color transparent. Okay, if you do hit that background color by accident, okay, just click this transparent icon right there to keep it transparent. The foreground color, this is where you get to choose the color that you're going to paint with. So if I'm doing a sky, I just picked blue. Okay. Now I'm not seeing my entire stage right now. I'm only seeing this big white blob. So there's where Control minus comes in handy, or Control plus, or Command minus and Command plus. So that's what my stage looks like. That's what's going to be on our TVs when we watch this. So what I'll do is I'll grab my paintbrush tool, set it to object mode. We got to go over here to the danger zone. We're going to turn on object mode. And I'm going to draw my sky. Remember, we have to completely close any object we draw. Okay, don't leave a gap. You want to do this all in one sweep. You see that gap there? That's going to cause me problems. So, by the way, if you draw something that you don't like and you want to undo it, there's Edit, Undo, and the hotkey that you saw me using was Control Z or Command Z. Okay, so that was under Edit, Undo. We use a lot of undos. Try, make mistakes, learn, right? All right, so now I got my outline of my sky. Let's fill it in. So I'm going to grab my bucket tool over here. Sorry, I'm going to grab my bucket tool right here and fill it in. A wonderful sky. All right, now let's grab our paintbrush tool. We're still on the background layer. Notice that? Change the color, and I'm going to draw that kind of same weird. By the way, I'm drawing with my mouse. I didn't even hook up my tablet. Okay, so now I'm going to draw that mountain part. So I'm going to grab that paintbrush, change my color, and I'm going to start drawing outside of that blue area. And you notice I draw outside of the screen. And here's the mountain, a little bit of a cliff. And again, we're going to close our gap, grab our bucket tool, and fill it. Whoa, that's very red. Not liking that very much. All right, so let's create a ground. So we'll do this a lot lighter. Again, start outside of those colors, and this is going to be our ground plane. And again, I'm just keeping this very simple. Obviously, you're going to be a little bit more detailed. Grab my bucket tool, and sometimes filling it is difficult, so just get close to the line. And sometimes it will, sometimes it won't. Sometimes it'll do that. Sometimes you're going to find you're having trouble filling in certain areas. And a lot of times that's because we're moving our pen or our mouse too fast, too quickly, and it's breaking up the line. So what we're going to do is we're going to redo that line. So you can undo it first. Edit, Undo, or Control Z, or Command Z. That's how we undo a drawing. Grab the paintbrush, make sure we're on the right layer, make sure we have the right color, and draw it slowly. Okay. Again, make sure it closes completely. Grab our bucket tool, and we're going to color outside of these two colors. And that's usually how we'll do it. Okay, and you notice that I clicked close to the line to fill it. Now these are our primary building blocks of our background. If you want to start adding detail, right, if you want to add little parts to this, we can add additional layers. So that's our blocked in background. Now when you want to get into the finer details of your background, you may want to put certain items on their own layers. Okay, so for example, if I want to add a cactus on this background, I add a new layer, call it cactus. Okay, and select the layer, select the paintbrush, select the color, and again, I'm drawing with the mouse, so this isn't going to be pretty. Draw your cactus. Woo, that's really bad. Again, make sure we close it and fill it. Now, if you're finding that you're filling the other layers, you can lock your background. So lock it, go back to your cactus layer, and fill it. It is a little bit tricky, and we do have to get close to the line to do that. So I'm going to undo that and just try that again, just to see if I can get the same thing to happen. I'll even create the layer again. So I did a whole bunch of Control Z's to undo everything. So I'm on my background layer. I'm now going to add a new layer, double click it, cactus, grab my paintbrush, make sure my color is correct. Again, draw it. I'm drawing with the mouse. Well, this one's turning out a little bit better. Oh, look at that. Okay, we're going to lock our background so I don't flood fill my background. Go back to my cactus layer, grab the paint bucket tool, get close to the line, and fill it. Okay, so you can have different layers for your background. So this video is primarily about working with the background and working with the layers and learning the interface. A couple of things we're going to want to review. Have you been saving your work? Probably forgot. So let's save our work first. So we're going to go File, Save. Okay, since we told it where to save the file at the beginning when we created the project, now all we have to do is hit File, Save, and it'll just save in that location. Okay, you'll also notice that there's a hotkey, Control S or Command S on Apple. So now's a good time to save. And some of the other hotkeys I was using, the space bar turns my icon to a hand, and that lets me move my screen around. If I want to zoom in to work on a very small detail, Control plus, and then I use the hand again, space bar. Control or Command minus, and again the hand tool. So let's do a quick review and we'll finish off this part of the video. So here's those tips that we talked about earlier. Create and save your project before starting. So you know where it is, you can now save it, close it, load it back up, and it's easy to continue to save, right? Control S. Before drawing, make sure you set your tool to object mode. That lets us control each object individually. To use the fill tool, if you want to flood fill something, you have to draw the entire shape. Now, you may choose to do some stuff with a sketchy line, right? Some people like that, and that's fine, and that's a certain look. But that also means that you're going to have to now fill it in with the marker tool. That's a little challenging. So for the bigger objects, I like to just complete the shape and flood fill with the bucket. Okay, and there's those hotkeys that we were talking about earlier. Control plus, Control minus to zoom in and out, and the space bar to move the screen around. Hope this project was fun for you. It's a good start. Continue playing around with your background and experimenting with this tool. Save often. And I'll see you in the next two videos.